like this. I got it.
You found the inside switch?
Yep.
And the outside switch, okay. Very good.
All right, folks. If we could all wander back in here and re-adjourn, we'll get the second half of this show on the road here. Keep the trains running on time. Pretty close. We're going to move to the West Coast now. Take a look at Klaus Landsberg and the Paramount station he put on the air, first known as W6XYZ and later KTLA in Los Angeles. Bringing us this presentation, one James O'Neill over here. He's been in broadcasting most of his life, broadcast engineer, graduating from University of Arkansas in 1969. 37 years in the broadcast side, many of it with the United States Information Agency's Television Film Service, WorldNet Television, the Voice of America Television, and then continuing on as a writer and editor at TV Technology Magazine. On the professional side, he's a life member of the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and the IEEE. A very impressive resume. And a board member of the National Capital Museum of Radio and Television, and here at our own Early Television Foundation board. Please welcome Mr. James O'Neill.
Thank you. Very nice introduction. Okay.
Click that, and away you go.
And where's my pointer clicker? Okay.
Got a little clock going for you.
All right. I'll try not to exceed my
Well, I'll come up and tackle you.
period when I'm welcomed. But anyway, what I have here is not a real deep techno dive. It's basically some eye candy, a picture show. And I want to tell you a little bit about the genesis of how this all came together. Actually, 3 or 4 things happened. One, I met, let me get this thing right, okay. I met Ed Reitan here at the Early Television Foundation get-together many years ago. And as a result of meeting Ed, I got to know Don Kent, who was a career employee at KTLA, the successor to W6XYZ. After Ed's death, we were comparing notes, and it seems that Don had come into possession of a large number of pictures, very high-quality pictures, taken over the history of the station, from the early 1940s well into the 1960s and beyond. And I said, what are you going to do with this? Well, these were images found at the station, obviously taken by a very large format camera, maybe a 4x5 graphic. So the pictures, almost all universally, are very good quality. So I got him to get the pictures, the originals, to a suitable library so they're accessible to the public. But he scanned everything. It was quite a project. He and some others were involved in this. And I said, you know, you really need to come to Columbus to share some of these pictures, tell a little bit of the story of the station. But I couldn't get him to budge. He's a West Coast guy. So I said, would you mind terribly if I shared these pictures because they are so beautiful? And they let us look back into time at what television was like in the early 1940s and beyond. And he said, no, I don't have an objection. So it is with Don's consent that I'm showing these. I put the show together. One thing else I have to say too, there are literally hundreds, probably well over 1,000 images. I didn't count them. All very good quality. One of the most difficult things about what I had to do for today was to cull down to something I could do reasonably in this amount of time given me. So I'm going to go pretty fast here. I'm not going to explain a lot, but where I need explanation, I will, where you think, you know, you might have some questions. And also, I've got a few dates and facts. There was very little information to piece together about this in terms of dates and times and who and what. Many of the people in the pictures I can't identify, but I have identified some. I've identified some of the incidents you're going to see portrayed. So let's get started. I said there were a few other things that brought this together, sort of pushed me to do this presentation. And everybody knows what this is, right? That's the Don Lee DeSalle Cadillac agency in Los Angeles, Bixel, back in the 30s. He started television in Los Angeles by bringing Harry Lubke down from San Francisco, Philo Farnsworth's Green Street Lab. Farnsworth was having some economic problems, couldn't pay him. Don Lee was running a radio station very successfully in Los Angeles, so he brought Lubke in to start Los Angeles' first television station in a mechanical format or iteration in the early 30s, later moving into electronic television. So WXYZ and the person I'm going to talk about, Klaus Landsberg, who put it on the air, were not the first. But I did want to show the little history, and you can see up the tip top, well, where's my pointer? Anyway, you see the tower on top of the building in this night shot. That was Los Angeles' first television station. Okay, this is the person I am going to talk a bit about, Klaus Landsberg. Now, I'd heard about Landsberg. I didn't know a lot about him, but I was given the opportunity by TV Technology magazine a few years ago to review a new book which had just come out, Los Angeles Television. It's basically a picture book, but there is quite a bit of printed information too along with the pictures. And they did mention, and I praise this in my review, a mention of Klaus Landsberg, because he was truly a television pioneer. And I bemoaned the fact in my review of Los Angeles Television that there wasn't really much known about Landsberg. Well, lo and behold, last year, another book comes out. This was by Evelyn DeWolf. That was Landsberg's first wife, and she put together a book and some pictures she had. She kept a lot of letters, and I was able to piece together a good bit about his life. Landsberg started his television career in Germany in 1936. He was a techno whiz kid. He liked to play with radio. We don't know how, but somehow he got involved in the 1936 television coverage of the Olympic Games held in Berlin. Okay, did a pretty good job there apparently. He was worried though because he was a Jew, and you know what was happening in the late 1930s in Germany, the Hitler Germany. But he had an idea for an instrument landing system for an airplane. This is according to his first wife. Not a lot of details on this, but apparently it was a pretty good idea. He was going for a patent, and he realized this might be his passport to freedom. And he played it, and sure enough he was. He was allowed to leave the country, take a job in Holland, then he ping-ponged to the U.S. He first went to work in Philadelphia for none other than Philo Farnsworth, stayed there a year or so. RCA, this was 1938-39, RCA was getting ready to do a big television exhibit at the 1939-1940 World's Fair. So he was hired to help prep this exhibit of television to show the public basically television on a large scale for the first time. When this was over, 1940, he went to work for Alan B. Dumont. Dumont had a military contract doing television for the Army, working out details of that. He was put on that. He was also assigned to help create Dumont's experimental television station in New York City. Well, it wasn't long before his employment had gotten underway at Dumont that Paramount Pictures decided they wanted to do a television station in Los Angeles, I guess maybe to compete with Don Lee, or maybe because they realized movies were going to be around, but television was going to come into play. They needed some background on this. Be that as it may, Paramount was a majority stockholder in Dumont, much to Dumont's dismay later on. I won't go there. But young Landsberg was hired to come out to California and build a television station on the Paramount lot. There he is again with one of the Dumont cameras that they started the operation with. There you are, Paramount Pictures, circa 1944. He arrived Landsberg arrived in Hollywood in 1941. By September 1942, he had the station on the air, W6XYZ, an experimental station. Don't know why they didn't go immediately commercial, because commercial broadcasting had been legitimatized by the FCC the year before. But anyway, the station started out as an experimental station, and they did a lot of television, a lot of experimenting, a lot of proving. One of the interesting things, not only was Landsberg the chief engineer, he was also the talent recruiter, a person who auditioned talent, and he directed shows. That sort of culture was maintained at XYZ and its successor, KTLA, well into the 1950s. So, more eye candy here. This is what the studio control room looked like in the mid-1940s at W6XYZ. I find it very interesting down here. This is basically all Dumont stuff. You'll see some more of this later. Down here at the bottom, you've got an ever-ready dry battery. Apparently, I see an intercom headset. Apparently, it powered the intercom system there. I just thought that looked a little interesting. But you see through the window, the control room window, the station. Over here you see a test pattern, and you see some of the lighting. I'm going to show you more of that. Okay, these are the cameras, and you see the lighting. Now, it's sort of interesting for a Hollywood movie studio. You would have a lot of lighting hitting talent face on, head on there from these matrices of lights. But that's what you see in all of the pictures. You don't really see any scoops or any other type of lighting other than these banks of photofloods. Interesting too are the sleds they built to put the cameras and the power supply and a processor for the Dumont iconoscope cameras. You'll see those nowhere else. I've never seen sleds like this for running cameras around in the studio. Another shot of the truck, you see the cameras up there, you see the power supply, the processors, they've been moved out of the studio. Apparently this was done a lot because they did a lot of location shooting all over the Los Angeles area, coming back with some sort of programming idea, or programming content for television. Here is Landsberg showing some young people the inner workings of the iconoscope camera. Well, you got a TV station, you need a transmitting facility, so Landsberg attended to that too. This is shot on one of the buildings. You can see the roof of the building and a ladder at the Paramount lot. This looks like a wooden mast, wooden tower constructed, a little bit of a crow's nest up here at the top, and the antenna elements here. I'm going to show you a close-up of the antenna. It's sort of interesting. There we are. The cone-shaped appurtenances there at the top. This is a dipole, a conical dipole for radiating the video signal. What is below it is a split ring dipole for radiating the FM audio signal, RL signal. Looking at this thing closely, then looking at the antenna that was on the Empire State Building, it looks pretty much the same, except this is not quite a sophisticated bit of packaging. But you do see the split ring FM dipole there for the oral transmitter. Of course, this is basically at sea level, the Paramount lot, maybe not even 100 feet above ground, so you don't get out too well. There were about 400 TV sets, it's estimated at this time frame, in the Los Angeles area. So Landsberg realizes he's got to get higher up to do a little bit better coverage. So he selects Mount Wilson as a venue for the W6XYZ transmitter back around 1943. You see the observatory over here, the Mount Wilson, some more equipment from the observatory. This was the first transmitter ever to be placed, maybe some Forest Service radio, but first broadcast transmitter ever to be put on Mount Wilson. I think there was a resort hotel up there and the observatory, and that was about it. But that's what it looked like in the early 1940s. And there's the antenna, which was basically the same one on the Paramount lot. You can see an open wire feeder, a ladder line, going down to the transmitter. View of the transmitter building, you still got the same antenna with the crow's nest up there. This was a building built for the transmitter and to house somebody to operate the transmitter, because obviously you had to be maintained at all times. Somebody had to be with it. So they had an operator stationed on the mountain. By the way, this is what Mount Wilson looks like today. So Landsberg really started something. Another shot here, this is out of sequence. This was taken later, probably late 50s, or late 40s, early 50s. And I included it for one reason. You still see some of the early installation here. What these people are doing, they're hoisting up a microwave system. But what struck me here, the bat wing. I thought it was something just stuck in the ground. They're getting ready to put it up, but I looked, no, it's got a harness on. It's being fed energy. I'm sure the OSHA people would just absolutely go ape if they saw something like this as accessible for somebody walking by on the ground. But that's why I put that picture in there. Again, there's so many great pictures in this collection. Here is Landsberg with the transmitter on Mount Wilson. It was rumored he'd built the transmitter. I don't think he had time to do this and get everything else going in the first year. I think really this is probably, I can't find a label on it, but I think it's a Dumont transmitter. There are other pictures of it. I've looked at some of the wiring, transformers inside. But there's the first real transmitter for W6XYZ on Mount Wilson. Being associated with a motion picture company, they had a lot of celebrities, a lot of entertainers, a lot of film stars there. Who dropped by the television studio in one of the sound stages at Paramount. The person on the sofa bed there is Veronica Lake. I thought I'd throw that in. Landsberg had a lot of friends in the film community as a result of his employment. News, circa 1940s. What happened? I lose it. Little bit different than the way we do news now behind an anchor desk. Here's somebody sitting in an easy chair, the W6XYZ newsroom, and here's the news in and out presenter explaining, I guess, some of the war news in Europe over his shoulder with a pointer. Yeah, television's changed a lot. Okay, I'm going to throw this shot in for a couple of reasons. Again, Paramount was trying to promote television. They had an outreach program. I understand they placed receivers in several of the police stations, police units around Los Angeles. Again, entertainment, and also I'm told they used this to send most wanted pictures, you know, of posters of criminals, and maybe even some blown up fingerprints from time to time to aid the law enforcement community. But I thought you might enjoy seeing the collecting group here, this Dumont receiver, this pre-war receiver. Found this too in the collection. This is from March 22nd, 1944. It's a television program schedule for WXYZ. Again, they had to maintain a certain number of hours each week to stay on the air to keep the FCC license. Of course, this was during the war, a lot of shortages, manpower, materials, but they were working 2 days a week. There's a Wednesday schedule from 8 till, 9 o'clock. There's a variety show. I guess that went maybe half an hour, and sign off. And basically the same thing on Friday, March the 24th, a half an hour of test pattern with recorded music. The main evening's program here is a slideshow of stills from The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, a major motion picture. And if you read carefully here, Eddie Bracken is in the studio to narrate the slides. That's as close as they came to running a movie. Okay, moving on. One more shot of the television facilities that existed. This is obviously the repair shop, and I put this in for a good reason. Look at the CRTs. Boxes of CRTs under the bench. These are Dumonts. Look at the plug assembly there on the tube. I mean, what we would give for some of those restoring sets now. Okay, 1947, the war is over, we're moving ahead. Paramount decided it was time to take the station from experimental to commercial. And doing so scored one of many, many firsts that XYZ and KTLA achieved during Landsberg and later epochs in the station's existence. 1947, this is January, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. This is, January 22nd, 1947, the station went commercial. It's estimated there were approximately 4,000 TV sets in the Los Angeles area. So you had maybe that many viewers. Hope was on there, a number of other celebrities. There is some film footage of this that does exist. I've seen it. I don't have access to it. But it's sort of hilarious. The Los Angeles Times reviewed the program, absolutely panned it. So there were people who were very critical of television, even early on. But this was their inaugural show, the evening of January 22nd, 1947. Here's a program schedule. I like that too. They included the fact they were transmitting from atop Mount Wilson. I'm assuming that the other stations were not up on the Eagle's Nest quite yet. But there's a program schedule a little better than what they were doing in the mid-1940s. Here's a rate card. You probably can't see this, but it lists live studio rates and film rates. And you could buy an hour, one-shot hour for KTLA live studio. That would cost you about $400. Or if you wanted a 1-minute commercial, $50. Cheapest thing you could buy was a time signal. I guess they announced the time, brought to you by the, Alpine Jewelers or whatever. Part of the cost was, the preparation cost was $20, the studio cost was $10, so it cost you $30 for basically a 20-second time signal. The slightly revised control room as W6XYZ became KTLA. Basically the same Dumont cameras. You look out in the studio, you see the test pattern, the lights, but not much change there. This is sort of an interesting story. If you look at the camera, it doesn't really look too familiar, but yet it does. What it is an RCA TK30 without the viewfinder. According to some notes I did find in this collection, there was the iconoscope cameras. The Dumonts were getting a little long in tooth as they went into the commercial era, or getting ready to go into the commercial era in 1947, and they were wanting to cover the Tournament of Roses parade. So what do we do? The iconoscopes are not that sensitive. They're becoming maintenance problems. RCA is coming out with this new camera, this image orthicon camera, much more sensitive. But it's sort of a developmental product right now here in late 46, early 47. They don't have the viewfinder ready. So KTLA, or actually at the time W6XYZ, decided to go ahead and make a purchase of some of the cameras and wait for the viewfinders to be developed and shipped. So they covered the parade with just an optical viewfinder. There's a little sight there, I believe, and direction from the truck as to how to focus and how to frame. Sort of interesting. But this was the first of many Tournament of Roses parades the station covered. Interesting too, this is from February 20th of 1947. This is another first for the station. What you see over there is a rubble. This was a fairly large electroplating plant. And there was a tremendous explosion. They had an inept chemist who mixed the wrong chemicals and put in a plastic tray to hold some parts to be clean. They were actually doing the reverse of electroplating. They were doing cleaning of aluminum. And this acted as a catalyst. And this thing went off like a small atomic bomb, like the mother of all bombs that was dropped recently. It inflicted damage over 9 blocks of downtown Los Angeles, killed something like 17 people, including a 10-year-old kid on his bicycle. Several blocks away, a piece of pipe was ejected over a 4-story building and struck the kid on the bicycle. So really devastating accident. Well, Landsberg said, let's get on the scene. They got the truck down and started rolling. Realized one problem: we don't have audio. Because heretofore, these remotes they did had always been planned and scheduled, and they relied upon the telephone company to bring back audio. They didn't have a subcarrier modulator for their microwave unit in the truck they were shooting up to Mount Wilson. So finally, the telephone company did some expeditious work, got them audio, you see the mic there, and they stayed on the scene, did continuing coverage. This was the first continuing coverage by television of a breaking news event. And KTLA gets that honor. Something else they did, another first. I can't possibly go through all of the first. Of course, they're setting up a microwave dish. That's obvious, but you don't know where this is. It's somewhere between, between Nevada and Hollywood. Actually, something like 275 miles of path. What had happened in 1951? The government, U.S. government, started the testing of nuclear weapons in Nevada. And this really interested Klaus because he was doing programming for the station. He got a camera up on Mount Wilson for the first one. They did a pre-dawn shot, and they were actually able to see the flash that far away, something like 275 miles from the Nevada desert. So he wanted to get on scene and do a live television coverage, close-up of a nuclear explosion. And they lobbied for this for a while. Finally, the military relented, and in late March of 1952 said, yeah, you can cover our next shot, which is April the 22nd. So they had like 3 weeks to prepare for this. Well, no satellites, no fiber, none of the video connectivity we got. They went to AT&T long lines. AT&T laughed at them. Get a lot, 275 miles of video in less than 3 weeks, no way, here's your hat, what's your hurry? So Landsberg took it on himself to bridge this 275 miles with a 6-hop microwave link. And having done microwave work myself, I find one of these links absolutely incredible. It was over 150 miles. Now they were up high, but I've never heard of a microwave shot going that far. But that was part of the linkage to get the test video back, the nuclear test video back from the desert there in Las Vegas. There's the truck. The winds were so high they actually had to anchor the truck down to the ground. It was rocking and blowing. That was a camera platform. And here's the proof of the pudding. They got the video. Not only did they run it live, the 3 networks also wanted the video. KTLA was not a network affiliate. So KTLA gave the 3 networks permission to air the video at the same time they did. So this was the first time they fed all 3 television networks. This was April 22nd, 1952, and somebody has a question.
A range from the truck to the...
That was about 8 miles from what I've been able to put together. So they're pretty close to ground zero. But again, one more first from KTLA. Okay, Landsberg, unfortunately, did not live to be an old man. He developed malignant melanoma. Actually, his wife noticed a dark mole on his back. He wouldn't go to the doctor. He was too busy with television. He didn't want to take time. His mother also nagged him, according to his wife's book. But he didn't take time until it was too late. He lived for a few years after it was diagnosed. I think underwent something like 7 surgeries and kept working the whole time and kept this from people around him. He went in business as usual. After he'd leave the operating room, he'd go back to the station and direct a show or put another show together. But unfortunately, he died in 1956 at the age of 40. Well, one of the people he'd brought in was this gentleman right here, John Silva, who a couple of years later, actually less than 2 years later, took over as chief engineer of KTLA. He was also switching shows, directing shows, just like Landsberg had done. It was part of the culture. But his biggest claim to fame here, and this actually started under Landsberg, was the airborne helicopter, or airborne video from helicopters. The genesis of this was in 1949, when Landsberg was still alive. They were doing a remote from San Diego aircraft carrier, and Landsberg wanted a shot, an aerial shot of the carrier deck. So they brought a helicopter in, took one of the TK-30s, took the viewfinder off to minimize the weight, put it in the lap of a guy in the helicopter, connected together several hundred feet of camera cable, a big heavy garden hose type camera cable, and flew the TK-30 up. Of course, a little bit of wrong maneuvering by the pilot, the camera could have been jerked out of the helicopter, or maybe the helicopter crashed, who knows. But it was successful, it gave them a good shot, and this stayed in the back of Silva's mine. About 1958-59, he started getting serious about airborne platform for video. And this is the first flight of the KTLA Telecopter. I'm going to show you a few more shots about putting this thing together. Here's the helicopter, the Bell helicopter, being ready. It's on a trailer. They're getting ready to put the electronics package in. Servo tracking of antennas, that was just totally out of the question at this point in time, late 50s. Very high power directional transmitter. No, that's not going to work because they didn't have the electricity, they didn't have the room, everything was vacuum tube. They couldn't take the weight on the helicopter. So what they did, they had a moderate powered transmitter, microwave transmitter, manufactured by General Electric. And they used a unidirectional antenna, which you're going to see in another shot. That's part of the electronics they're putting together that fit on the skid of the helicopter. There it is, all put together, getting ready to go for this first flight. Unfortunately, and here's the antenna. It looks like sort of an oversized flute, if you will. But this hung down below the helicopter. It was pulled up, of course, for landing the helicopter. I couldn't find a picture of their first helicopter, this Bell, with this antenna deployed in flight. But I did find a later one, and you can see it right there. And this is how they beamed the video back from all over the Los Angeles basin. Again, how many television stations today don't have airborne video capability? But this was where it started. KTLA, basically Landsberg's idea and carried out by Silva later on. And I don't want to run up too much time. There's so many pictures. Here's an interesting picture there. They didn't take the TK-30 up anymore. This is a Kohu industrial camera, no viewfinder, but you see the long lens on the camera. And it proved apparently very satisfactory for what they were doing. This picture was taken, I'm assuming, probably around 1960. It shows you what they had in terms of news gathering. Again, it was an independent station. They did a lot of local news, on-the-spot reporting coverage, a lot of local origination outside of the studio. But this is what they had there, three trucks and the helicopter at that time. There are several pictures that show how this fleet of vehicles the station owned grew. Get into the color era. I mentioned the Turn 'Em to Roses parade. They did, I believe, what I've been able to piece together, of course, NBC did the first one in color, 1954, January 1st. I believe it was KTLA did the next one, January 1st, 55, in color. I'm not sure, this is a little later, but this looks like maybe the back of a 56 Chevy station wagon, 55. So this fits in with the time frame. And you see that the TK-41 up there, they're all, getting ready to do the whole thing. They've got the big van and another truck there too for the microwave. So, questions? Okay, thought I had a question. Here's another shot here, unfortunately not in color, but you see one of the TK-41s there, and shot through the floats. I wish we had some more color, but that's the only color picture I could find of this whole thing, and that's sort of faded. Okay, I'm really running long here. I don't want to keep you too long on this. I want to make way for the next presenter. This is sort of an interesting thing. Without any narration, you have no clue as what's going on here. This is a Marconi 4.5 image orthicon camera, Mark IV, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? Okay. They're out on location and they're shooting video of a Western. Well, this is another first by the station. This was the first outdoor production Western to be captured on videotape, shot exclusively on video with video cameras. It was a very short lived, it ran only like 6-7 weeks. It was called Wrangler. But it is interesting because it was done on videotape rather than film. Now, a lot of editing goes in any sort of television production. So how did they do this? Obviously it was not done live. How did they do this? Well, there's Silva again. This is another device he got a patent on. Actually, he got some patents in connection with the telecopter. I could do a whole presentation on this thing. These are storage cathode ray tubes made by Hughes. They're called tonatrons. They have two guns, a writing gun and a flood gun. Once you project an image on the tube, or image is projected by the electron gun, it is frozen and reiterated. And you can trigger these things to capture one single frame of video or less. So what Silva figured out, because the only editing on videotape possible at the time, because you didn't make a picture when the 2-inch quad machine stopped. You only got a video out of the machine when the tape was being pulled. So the editor would stand by, I think I want to go there. They would stop the machine, mark the approximate location with a grease pen, take the tape off, cut out this point. They'd done that for another point, and insert tape mechanically, splicing it in with splicing tape. And it was not frame accurate. It was nowhere near frame accurate. So these are pretty sloppy edits. So Silva said, let's see if I can do something better. Of course, we do this later on with time code on the tape, but this was long before time code. This was around 1960. He heard about these storage tubes. He said, gee, I can set something up. I can put a button down for the director. When he sees something he likes, he hits the button. One of these will give time 0. The next 1 second later, 1 second later, after that, another second later. Then we can go back and do this again and refine it and finally get it down to tenths of a second, finally get it down to a frame by repeated passes. And by putting an electronic mark on a track on the tape, we know exactly where the in point and out point is. And by golly, it worked, and he got a patent on it, and that's how they edited that show Wrangler. So quite ingenious before the advent of timecode editing. That's all I'm going to say. Again, I've got gazillions of slides that Don Kent presented me with, scans thereof. But this has just been a brief history of W6XYZ morphing into KTLA, and a little bit about Klaus Landsberg, who made it all possible. Thank you. Don't want to walk over there.
Thank you, sir. Perfect. Being a broadcaster myself, I could watch this stuff all day long, and I marvel at how these engineers and production people at these local stations they kept inventing things and inventing things and inventing things with $1.98 to work with. I did mine. John Yurkon's coming up here. You've been reading about his effort on his all-glass 15 GP22, and I can't wait to hear the update. But this little presentation will kind of tell you something about why we are here to start with. We're here to be a part of preserving all this stuff that's in that room over there. Preserve this kind of knowledge for people that are coming along. And I've seen a few younger faces show up for this edition of this thing, and I'm glad to have you all here. But I'm going to go back. It needs a couple of dollars here and there. or donations of your stuff that you can't use to the museum. The museum can turn around and disperse it. Cash comes in. But all of that effort comes around to this kind of effort here. Preservation, to keep this stuff running, operating, knowledge of the history of it, unearthing the history of it, like these photographs that came from Mr. Kent. Thank you. That's what we're here for. And I can't wait to hear about this glass report. Where are you? Where's John? There he is. Please welcome. Take it away. How much time?
30. 30 minutes.
50?
30.
30. You got it.
Wanted to give a status report on the all-glass 15 GP 22 project. Just a quick rehash. Originally pressurizing it in the face